Behind the Mirror of Music with Dannii Cohen.
Hello, and welcome to Behind the Mirror of Music. My name is Dannii Cohen. This week's guest is Dan Burton. Dan Burton has been a much-loved triple threat leading man on the stages of West End and Europe for over 20 years. Known for both his singing and dancing abilities, he has starred in the revivals of many classics, including Singing in the Rain, Gypsy, The Pajama Game, 42nd Street, Top Hat, Guys and Dolls, West Side Story, Grease, Chicago, White Christmas, as well as the original West End productions of Jersey Boys, Legally Blonde, Dirty Dancing, and much more. I hope you'll enjoy the show.
Hey, Dannii, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm good. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. There was a bit of a hold up. My camera is up too high now and I couldn't get it on the right spot again.
Oh, right. Don't worry. It happens to the best of us.
Okay, what are you doing right now?
Right now,
Yes.
well, performing-wise,
Yes.
so actually I'm having a slight break. I've recently become a father, so for the first time. So I have a beautiful little girl, which is keeping me very, very busy at the moment. So that's why I haven't been on stage at the minute.
That's wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And how did you fall in love with music and acting?
Well, I sort of started really when I was about 15 years old. It was quite late to start dancing, but it was sort of growing up watching Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire and being sort of watching, remember at Christmas, watching Singing in the Rain would come on and, all the favorite Danny Kaye roles like, in White Christmas, things like that. And I used to just be mesmerized about how these performers could just sing, dance and act all at the same time and make it look effortless. And of course, obviously, as I've got older and sort of taken on those tasks of playing those sort of big triple threat roles, you sort of realize that they get to shoot it once on film, maybe a couple of times, and then that's it, immortalized forever. But trying to recreate that live on stage, 8 shows a week, 8 performances a week, sometimes more, it's quite a hard task, not only on the body, but on sort of your physicality and your vocal cords and and those sorts of things. I mean, I remember always saying that when I did things like when I played Don Lockwood in Singing in the Rain, I must have dropped. I mean, it was a 3-month contract, and I did the contract over sort of 3 or 4 contracts. And every single time I did the show, I was like a racehorse. I literally ended up losing about 1.5 stone in weight over 3 months because you don't leave the stage. You just constantly go round like a conveyor belt. And as rewarding as it is, I love it. I love sort of every show trying to be better and better. It really was quite amazing, an amazing experience. It's something I always look back on and I think, yeah, I'm really, really glad that I undertook that challenge because I love a challenge. That's just people that know me know that. But also Gene Kelly, you can't really get much better in that art form. He's the greatest.
You did many of those big classic dancing roles. It's that become your specialty?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, it's something that I didn't quite fall into it because you never ever know when you're younger, like anyone, when you're training, you don't know what you're going to go on to propel to do within your career as you get older. And so certain opportunities have sort of come to me where, say I've gone up for a show or a production or a piece and I've really wanted to do it, and say that there's, I've not been fortunate and I've not got that job. I've ended up getting another job, which I didn't think I was going to get if I initially got the first job. So things have sometimes materialized in ways that I didn't really know. Things like Gypsy, for example, they initially wanted to cast it quite young with young people in the cast, and then they decided to up the age range for it and have slightly older people playing younger. And it was just through coincidence I happened to be doing a workshop for another musical at the time in a specific venue in London, and the choreographer Stephen Mear was in auditions for that production next door, and we came out on a break. And I'd worked with Stephen a few times before that, at that moment. And he literally said to me, I believe that, we're going to be recasting this, but going slightly older. Would you be interested in coming in? And I was like, absolutely. And so then things sometimes, little seeds are planted and things grow from them that you don't ever expect. And also when I was sort of training, in my naivety as a young actor performer, always thought that shows like Gypsy were, it's always for the girls because there's so many girls parts, there's so many girls roles. I never thought for 1 minute that I would ever play Tulsa. or everything else that came with that role, whether that was being nominated for an Olivier Award for essentially what was 3.5, 4 minutes on stage. Absolutely blown my mind. And into this day, it's still, when I think of it, it still blows my mind to be recognized for such, for such a great role in a moment on stage is still a massive highlight for me, and something that I will always be grateful for. A little tip as well, a little bit of nugget of information, which not many people might know, is that I've been very fortunate in my career that I've done West Side Story numerous times. I played Bernardo. Years later, I went back and played Riff from the other side, from the other side of the gang. And Jerome Robbins' choreography is phenomenal for me, and I always feel like everything has a reason and everything has a place. Every single step has it's like acting through dance at its pinnacle, at the best possible way. And for me, I really enjoy doing that choreography. Now, I'm a firm believer that West Side Story, I've done different versions of it and things like that. Jerome Robbins' choreography has always stuck with me as something that's really sort of meaningful and has intent. Until I did Gypsy, and sort of, if you go online and you see any other version of the number that I did, All I Need Is the Girl, it's step by step, contractually and by law, they have to do exactly the same choreography that Jerome Robbins choreographed, whether it was on Broadway, whether it was in the UK, black and white, color, any version you find online, you'll see, if it's the normal proper version, that it is that choreography. And for the first time, when I did Gypsy, at the Savoy in that production, Stephen Mear, who choreographed the show, had the rights for the first time in history to change that number, the choreography, and he got to do it on me. So together we managed to create that version, which is now obviously immortalized on DVD or video or what have you. And we got to change that for the first time. And so for me, I'm a bit conflicted, because I would always say, when anyone said things to me like, as far as Jerome Robbins' choreography is concerned, what do you think? And I'm like, with West Side, oh my God, it always has a place. And it's so meaningful in today's society. The same topics still arise, and it still has purpose in the modern society. But for me, getting the chance to be able to change that and adapt that and have that on me was an absolute, and it was something that I didn't even realize really till going into it. And it just sort of came in, was addressed in the rehearsal room. So yeah, that was quite special. But just going back to your initial, I've deviated, sorry, going back to your initial question, sort of these triple threat roles, whether it's, Fred Astaire playing Jerry Travers in Top Hat, Gene Kelly, Don Lockwood, all these sort of triple threat roles, Tulsa in Gypsy, to name a few, it's funny, they sort of have snowballed one after the other, especially with things like White Christmas. When you get those gifts of a role, like the Dannii Cohen made famous for, the Phil Davis, those triple threat old school song and dance parts, they demand physicality, not even just in the acting, but also, obviously with the choreography. But to be able to dance that and emulate even an essence of what you see on the movie, and you see it live on stage, you can't ever show that you're tired. You can't ever show whether you've done 2 performances that week or whether you've done 8 or 10 or 12 or however many you do. I think recreating that, I think, is amazing, and something that I've always strived to do, especially when I was younger in my 20s. It's definitely something that I strive for every show, because you never ever know. Someone told me this once. You never ever know who's in the audience. You never ever know. It might be the 20 millionth time you've played a role and performed that role, but you never ever know. There might be some person in that audience that's never seen you, whoever that may be. And so that you're their first impression of something. It could be their first time at the theatre. It could be, the first time seeing that production. Subsequently, it could be a critic, or it could be somebody else, a director that might want to work with you in the future. You never ever know. And so I always carry that mindset that whenever I go out and perform, it's a first time for everyone. And also it's the first time for investigating the role. You never stop learning, you never stop improving, you never stop finding things, you never stop making mistakes. But with theatre especially, you have to try and find a very good way of making it look like it was meant to happen if you do.
Well, it's so great that you are doing musicals like this, because you hear so many people in the business say that some shows are dated or some shows shouldn't be performed again. Well, I think there's always an audience for the classics.
Oh, completely. Yes, I agree as well. And, times do change. People's thoughts and processes also change and adapt as time moves forward. Ideas change, things like that. And of course, there are some old-fashioned musicals, very old-fashioned musicals, that are now no longer performed because times have changed. And so it's very, very, it's very easy to be stuck in the past. And I think you should move forward. But then also there's certain things that are from a certain time. And as long as it's not offensive to people, then things should be able to be for the sake of art and for the sake of sort of reproduction to enjoy what was originally created, as long as it doesn't cause anyone offense, I feel like that they should be remembered and they should be showcased. I know I've been known from a lot in my career from doing old-fashioned musicals as well as the newer ones, but people always remember the old ones because they don't make musicals like the triple threat old school dance, singing, and acting musicals. There aren't those roles in that many in modern musicals. They're just not written that way. They're ever so slightly different. There are the occasional, but those sort of old-fashioned ones, I think a lot of people have nostalgia for them. And so, I sort of been very fortunate within my career to sort of dissect as I've grown as an actor and grown and got older. I sort of managed to deviate and used all these different skill sets in my toolbox to sort of do different things as they've come along. And work has never felt like work.
So what was your first professional role?
My first professional role. Well, my very first job when I graduated from training, I was supposed to be in the original production of Mary Poppins in the West End, but I had a really bad knee injury when I was training just before I graduated, and so I was unable to undertake that. And luckily, I had an operation on my knee, my ACL snapped, and they actually said that I wouldn't properly be able to dance ever again. So it's been quite a miracle that I've managed to carry on dancing and doing what I've done. And so basically about 6 months to a year later after that had happened, I auditioned for Cameron Mackintosh again for the musical Miss Saigon. And so Miss Saigon was my first professional show when I was about 18, 19 years old as a GI in the chorus, in the ensemble. And it was amazing. One of the best sort of introductions to the musical world. One of the greatest shows, isn't it? And yeah, that was my first job.
For me, you started in the original West End production of Legally Blonde. What was this time like?
Yeah, that was great. I mean, that's fast forwarding a few years. Yeah, really, really great. I'd seen the movie, like I think loosely, and so I kind of knew what it was about. And then when they said it was happening, it had already been done on Broadway, and I remember seeing a clip of them skipping, doing the Whipped into Shape number, and I thought, oh, that'd be quite fun to do. And there's lots of different character and cameos and I like that as an actor. I like to be able to play different parts and things. So I thought, oh, well, I'll give it a go. And so I went and auditioned for it, and yeah, sort of getting to play Nikos Argitakos, the pool boy was fantastic, and also getting to play Padamadan, the Indian prince, was also great fun, and I had a lot of understudies in there as well. So I was kept busy a lot throughout that year. But it was a very I always think back of it on good times, and I never dropped my skipping rope once. I swear to this day, in a year I never dropped my skipping rope. But yeah, it was really great fun and lovely to work with Jerry Mitchell. He was absolutely fantastic to work with and under and be directed and choreographed by. It was great fun.
You started as Frankie Valli in Jersey Boys. It must have been a totally different kind of role than your usual material.
Yeah, I mean, it was very different. I mean, I went into the show as Joe Pesci, and I understudied Ryan Malloy, who was absolutely phenomenal in the role of Frankie Valli, and was, in my opinion, born to play the role. Absolutely fantastic. And to be able to be in the show and night after night stand on stage and perform on stage and watch his craftsmanship of playing that role was absolutely fantastic. Not only as a performer, but as an understudy at that point in my career. It was I felt very blessed. Because the man's got an amazing vocal talent. The role of Frankie itself is huge. I mean, the vocal prowess that was required to do that role. And it's something that I did struggle with because naturally, as you can tell from me speaking now, I have a very low voice.
Yes.
But I have a very high falsetto. But the way Frankie sings is very different to how I normally would sing and speak. And getting to go on for that role, I think I went on for about 115 performances in the year for that role. It was incredible. I absolutely, it gave me a new aspiration at that point in my career as an understudy for acting, having to deal with heavy monologues. And then as soon as you finish this massive A4 monologue, you're then going into singing 3 or 4 massive songs, and you never ever stop. And it sort of coincides a bit with those sort of Gene Kelly roles where you literally feel like you're on a sushi bar going round and round, and you meet the next scene and it goes into the next song, and I love it. I absolutely adored that. And working differently, I got to sort of put my feet to rest dancing wise, because it's very stylized dancing wise in the show. It's not as technical jazz or technical ballet. It's very sort of stylistic with the clicking and the movements. So it's all about the acting and the vocals for me. And I really felt that year being in that show at the Prince Edward was brilliant. And their songs are fantastic. And the fact that it's based on real life is it's really great to get in depth with that character and really sort of get your hands on it and feel like what your Frankie Valli would be like. And I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it. However, my voice did change, and you go through singing teachers while you're with the production. Well, I did then. I don't know if it's the same in productions around the world now. And so I learned the ways to sing like Frankie Valli. And basically, a lot of things were like things I got told at college not to do, like sing through your nose to get that sort of nasal sound. It was to do that and have the sort of gear changes in the voice so you can hear the falsetto to the chest registers, rather than making it smooth and effortless. They wanted to hear that clunky gear change from your falsetto to your chest, things like that. And so getting to sort of learn and play that, it makes me tick. I love those things because it made me a real challenge for me to sort of work on. But yeah, but that role was just, it was absolutely amazing, and something that I remember sat watching it with my mentor. And it was one of the opening week of the West End run. And I said to him, I was like, I'm going to play that role at some point in my career. I'm going to do it. And then a couple of years later, lo and behold, it happened, and I ended up getting the job, which was brilliant. And there's some wonderful people in that production that I'm still friends with now, that I look back and smile on. But yeah, it's a very different set of skills, and also being sent to have your voice to a singing teacher, sing that way, that sort of Frankie school of singing, Frankie Valli school of singing. It also took me about a month after I finished the show a year later for my register to lower, because I just lost about an octave of my voice because it was just shifted and went all the way up. And I thought, oh, you think I'm never going to be able to sing those songs again? I'm never going to be able to sing If Ever I Would Leave You from Camelot, or Old Man River, or any of those really bassy, low sort of songs. And then gradually, bit by bit, my voice just sort of found its way and then sort of came back. But I still managed to find a way of keeping the top stuff. It was like I'd gone through a sort of school of learning. And so I managed to, all that strength and everything I learned from all that top stuff that I didn't necessarily have strength in before, it just, it's very rare for songs, in my opinion, and what I found in my career. If you think of pop songs and things, it's very rare that you sing in falsetto for a whole song. Normally you sing a whole song and at the end you go into a falsetto note, or there's a little bridge or something that goes into slight falsetto. But to literally batter your falsetto into your chest and literally sort of jump up and down throughout the whole song after song after song, whether it's Big Girls Don't Cry, Walk Like a Man, Sherry, all those songs that come back to back in the show, I really had to try and get stamina. And anyone that's played the role or covered it or been on stage in that production will say the same thing. It's never something that just goes, oh, it's just natural and comes easy. I would say probably, unless you're Ryan Malloy, who's absolutely brilliant, and it just sits right in his voice, and it was beautiful to listen to him sing that most nights.
It's a wonderful journey. And have you been able to use your falsetto voice in other productions that you did?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate, and there is actually some clips that some naughty people at the time in the audience took videos of. But back when I was in the London original cast of Dirty Dancing, it was my first West End show after I did Saigon. I understudied the lead singer in that show, and I was on for a show. Didn't know someone had filmed, but it was before, I think, mobile phones just started becoming sort of well used, and someone had filmed it in the audience, and it was online somewhere, I think, and I was singing In the Still of the Night, that song, which uses your falsetto, and I always remember it. But technically in the show, I was up on a step somewhere, and I had to sing this really high note. I think it was top C or something like that, but I had to hold it, and the stage sort of lifts up, and as the Johnny and the baby were up and they finished the song, the stage goes down and you hit this high note, and you have to wait for the stage to go all the way down to the bottom. I think it was about 15 seconds or something silly like that, and it had to go all the way down, and then once it finished, then you could finish the note and cut it off. And I remember thinking, oh, this is long. I guess that kind of paved the way for doing Jersey Boys probably. But yeah, but also I've been very lucky with my voice that I have a very big vocal range and can do lots of things with my voice, as I've done throughout my career. So to be able to play Gene Kelly roles and then also get to do things like Frankie Valli or Legally Blonde or things like that, I've been able to really sort of use my voice and bend it. And again, I love challenges, and I've loved to be able to do different things rather than just be, I'm just this sort of singer, or I just sing things like that. So got to do pop, rock, old school musicals, new stuff. It's something I really like to do. But yeah, answering your question, there's been quite a lot of stuff that I sing in musicals, but also for auditions or projects or concerts and things. There's always things that I've used my falsetto for. But as I said previously, it's funny that usually in those songs you only use your falsetto for a couple of notes or a bridge or something very light, rather than a whole song. So yeah, and luckily the falsetto is still there and really strong. So I'm very happy about that.
Maybe you could do a Bee Gees musical in future.
Yeah, probably could. Yeah, definitely.
What is that like doing the Pajama Game?
Oh, I mean, that was again fantastic. I mean, getting to work with Richard Eyre, who's one of, in my opinion, one of the greatest theatre directors. He does a lot of film, but to work with him in a room and learn from his experience was, I said, should I say, Sir Richard Eyre? He was absolutely incredible. And little did I know at the time, I ended up working with him again. So we did Pajama Game in Chichester, and then it went to the West End about a year and a half later. So we had to wait quite a while after its initial stage at Chichester before it transferred to the Shaftesbury. And so I got to work with him again when we got back in the rehearsal room for that. But then I ended up doing Betty Blue Eyes for him with him again, which was brilliant. His mind and his creativity and his kindness and his knowledge is just one of those directors. I mean, I feel very fortunate, and as I'm getting older, I look back in my career that I've done so far. When you have time, and the pandemic made everyone stop, obviously, because everything closed. But when you actually take stock of things that you've gone through, you're always quickly on to the next thing and the next production, or things move so quickly, don't they? And to actually take stock of what I've done and who I've worked with and who I've worked for, and you actually think that was incredible, or actually I didn't take time at the moment to appreciate actually that, or what they said, or what they did, or what notes they gave, or things like that. And I've been very fortunate. People like him, Jonathan Kent that did Gypsy, other amazing directors, have been really, really sort of beneficial examples of things that I've learned from when I've been in productions. I mean, that's not even talking about choreographers. Obviously, as I'm sure you know, I've worked with Stephen Moore a lot in my career, and when you get to work with someone on a sort of one hand basis, you start a conversation and you've already, things have already been choreographed because you finish each other's sentences choreographically, and it's very nice to have that sort of relationship with somebody that you spar off each other, and you have that, and you trust each other implicitly, which is great, really, really great. But yeah, I mean, Richard Eyre in the Pajama Game was just something brilliant. And at that time, I was understudying the leading role of Sid Sorokin, and we had lovely Hadley Fraser, who was phenomenal in the role at Chichester. And then he was busy on another project, and so Michael Xavier ended up doing it in the West End, who also is lovely and brilliant and very, very talented. And sort of getting to understudy both chaps, I felt that as an understudy at that point in my career, that was the last part I understudied before playing leading roles. And literally, it was, for me, I got to get the best of Hadley's production, of performance of Sid, and also the best qualities of Michael's and my own. So I managed to sort of put this all in a pot, and then I managed to go on an opening night. And luckily for me, it was a press night, and the rest is history. I managed to get great reviews, and then from then on, I started playing leading roles. I got my step up, which was amazing after understudying for so long. And but also, I absolutely loved it. I mean, I feel like people these days want the fast route straight to playing leading roles, and sometimes that happens, and that's great. But I really felt like over a decade, I managed to learn and get things wrong and make mistakes and learn my craft from being in productions and learning from leading men and leading ladies, learning from people and sort of honing my craft, as it were, so that when that time came, I felt completely ready to sort of take on the challenge and do it, which was brilliant. Absolutely, absolutely fantastic. And again, an old school musical Pajama Game, but songs that are still fantastic and so well written, and every night was a joy, absolute joy to perform in that production.
Yes, I believe it's being rediscovered by a lot of young people these days because, as I said, I keep hearing about it suddenly. People are posting pieces of it and discussing it. I think it's sort of, well, becoming of this time again.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's quite interesting, isn't it? As we talked earlier about old productions and the way things evolve and things that aren't necessarily deemed acceptable anymore. But I think the Pajama Game specifically, I feel like if you're going to do a piece, and this is why Richard Eyre is so brilliant, if you're going to do it in the time frame that it was set in, again, as long as it doesn't offend anybody, but if it was done in such a way that it sort of was like, as soon as you sat in the auditorium and watched the production, you were almost taken back to a previous time as if it was happening there and then. So it was sort of the honesty and integrity of doing the production. I felt it was honest, and I felt like it literally it was done, in my opinion, in such a way that it made you as a performer, but also remember the audiences and the responses from audience members, how they just felt transported back to a previous time that gone by. And we had people that were elderly, but we also had people that could remember, but also had people that were new, that were young, that loved it, that were discovering the songs for the first time. And I think that's the joy of theatre. You get that live element that you don't get behind a camera or you see on TV or on screen. To actually see that and be immersed in that, I think is really, really special. And I love it. I mean, I love the production. It was absolutely wonderful. We were very, very lucky. It got rave reviews, and it was a sold out season for the time that we did it. And it was a triple threat extravaganza. And again, I met some wonderful people on that production. It was great.
I was thinking with all songs that that all songs are new again when you hear them for the first time, because they will always be new to someone.
Oh, completely. I mean, and also it's good, isn't it? I mean, essentially things should always be adapted. Things should always be revisited. And also different teams, different creative teams, directors, choreographers will put a different stamp on a production. So I think things should evolve. Things should change. Again, as long as they don't cause offense. And that's specifically in old-fashioned productions, because there's some things that you just can't do anymore, and quite rightly. But there are things that I feel like, if it's done with integrity and it's done earnestly, I think, with integrity, I think there's a place for anything and everything.
Absolutely. And talking about older plays and pieces, you also did Mousetrap for a while.
I did, yes. I did a stint as Giles Ralston in the Mousetrap with Ian Talbot, another wonderful man, wonderful director, who then, after I did that production, I went on to do White Christmas at the Dominion, which he also ended up taking over directing from the initial conception that Nikolai Foster had done, who was also brilliant. But Ian Talbot in the Mousetrap, I mean, to work with a master of his craft, he was brilliant. I mean, the fountain of knowledge that man has is incredible. And any of your viewers, listeners, or who don't know who Ian is, I think he recently just finished playing a role in Mrs. Doubtfire in the West End. I think he was the angry postman. I think that's the role. But he was in the original cast of that over here, and he's not only an OBE, but a wonderful chap. And when you're dealing with comedy or when you're dealing with seriousness, especially something with Agatha Christie, I love Agatha Christie. So when the opportunity came up to do the Mousetrap, I jumped straight away to do it. Also because I'd done a lot of musicals and I wanted to do some plays, and just as things came about, it just so happened that role was available, and I jumped at the chance. And so getting to play that role with a wonderful bunch of players in that production, the actors were fantastic. We had a great time. It was the height of summer when I did it. It was over that part of the year, and so getting to wear knitwear in summer wasn't always the easiest when you're supposed to be acting like it's snowing outside and it's freezing. But that aside, it stood the test of time, and also to be a part of history. I mean, that performance, that play, is the longest running performance in theatre history. It's quite extraordinary. You have to keep the secret. If you watch it, you have to keep the secret. You can't say the outcome. That's the rule.
I think it's amazing this can be running for such a long time, and people are still coming, and special actors are still there. It's such a wonderful thing.
Absolutely, it's an institution. It really is. Really is.
You talked about White Christmas. How was that like to perform such an iconic show?
Oh, I mean, again, when when it came up, I think I can't remember exactly what I was doing at the time, but I was doing another production, and again, Stephen Mear was choreographing it, and I think he was very interested in me coming in for it. And initially, I was up for both the leads, for Bob Wallace and the Phil Davis role, but naturally, because of my dancing, that sort of knocked the Bob Wallace out. And Bob's usually a little bit older, but because of my dancing, I was required, I think, and wanted for the Phil Davis role, which I ended up doing. But subsequently, we did it in Leicester, and we ended up doing another 3 times after that at the Dominion and on tour for 2 times. And this is obviously during the pandemic, so as that sort of in between. So it was one of those shows. I've been very fortunate in my career. I've never really gone back to something. I've always wanted to move forward. I've always wanted to grow. I've always wanted to do different challenging productions and things and events. And as you probably can gather, that's kind of what I'm like as a person. I like to sort of better myself and move forward. But with White Christmas, just the number alone, the best things happen when you're dancing. That in the movie with Dannii Cohen, it's gold. It's like MGM gold, in my opinion. It's so beautifully choreographed by Hermes Pan, and literally is just it's just beautiful to watch. So to recreate that on stage, which is, I mean, it's 12, 14 minutes long, the whole thing, and that comes after you've done Let Yourself Go, which is a massive number at the top of the show, and you don't leave the stage. You literally are conveyor belting through the production. Then you hit this massive MGM number. I mean, again, I lost so much weight doing that show. It was great. I never had to go to the gym. It was fantastic. I did what I want. I stayed fit. But I really had to look after my body. I really did. And it was ever since doing Singing in the Rain onwards that sort of was something of a mantra that I had to literally just really look after myself. Couldn't go out, couldn't go for a drink at the bar after the show. I'd literally be straight home, whether I had a matinee or not, just to make sure that my body, I could look after it like an athlete. I mean, it's like a bit like being an Olympian in some ways. You literally have to look after yourself so that you can do the job. It's technically so difficult. That production, White Christmas, that we did, that Stephen Mear choreographed, and it was directed by Ian Talbot and Nikolai Foster. It was so demanding physically, but also Stephen, every time I work with Stephen Mear, he pushes me a bit more. He gets more out of me. He sort of finds a way, and I push myself as well. So I always end up giving more and more and more as I do these productions, and because he knows that I can, we want to make things the best they possibly can be. But that production was very, very, very hard on my body. It was very, very difficult. And but when the opportunity came back to do it again, and they asked me if I'd go back to it, I didn't even hesitate. I was like, absolutely, because those roles don't come along every day. Those triple threat old-fashioned roles in that production, at that caliber of choreography, you know, and intent in the directing scenes, it's a gift of a role, an absolute gift to be that sort of song and dance man, you know. And so for me, it was like another tick on the bucket list to get to be able to do that. And also, my Bob Wallace original was Danny Mac, and I went through several different ones, from Matt Jeans to Jay McGuinness from the pop band The Wanted. So they're all very, very different, and all brought their own flavors, but it's a double act between the two leading guys, and it's a bit like Ant and Dec, the presenters. You got to have that camaraderie, but I always knew that my Bobs had my back, so it was really, really, really special, and I'm still in touch with all of them now. So that's really, really great.
Of all the roles you've done, what was one of your absolute favorites?
Oh, that's a really tough question. I've been very fortunate to have had loads, lots and lots of favorite roles, and the next one comes along, and you think, oh, that's amazing too. Oh, there's different ones for different reasons. I'd say probably initially Don Lockwood in Singing in the Rain, getting to do that, standing on stage at the Châtelet Theatre in Paris initially, and standing under the rain. The stage, I don't know if you know, visitors know, but the stage at the Châtelet, it's an opera house. So the stage itself was like standing in New York in a monochrome movie set on stage. It was like being outside. It was huge, vast. And to stand in the rain and just look out upon thousands of audience in this opera house was just something I'll never, ever forget. And I thought it couldn't get any better, but I turned 30 when I did one of those contracts on that job. And the lovely Gareth Valentine, the wonderful MD Gareth Valentine, surprised me. And my wife was also in the show as well, and on the creative team. And they'd arranged with a full orchestra, massive orchestra, and the cast, that at the end of the show, I take my final bow, and the whole cast were on stage, and he told me to wait. He was holding my hand. He was like, wait, just wait. I was thinking, what's going on? Is someone else coming on stage? Have I done something wrong? What's going on? Has there been an accident? And all of a sudden, the drums went in the orchestra, and then the full audience and the cast and everybody, spotlight came on me, and they all sang "Happy Birthday" to me, and it's something that I never ever will forget at that moment. And I thought things couldn't get any better. And that's just not even talking about playing the role itself, but actually going back to Paris. It closed for refurbishment before the pandemic. This was a few years before the pandemic hit. And they built the Châtelet Theatre, considering it's a huge opera house, they built it in the Grand Palais, Grand Palace. Bit by bit, it was insane. And they had a huge, massive auditorium there. And it's a bit like what I would say over here, Meadowhall, the shopping centre in Sheffield. It's huge and long, the Grand Palais, and it's glass roofed. So if you look up, and as the show was going on and the lights start fading down, you see the moon just coming out across the sky. And you almost feel like you're outside. It's vast, it's huge, the Grand Palais. It's being used for the Olympics at the minute for a lot of things, a lot of sports. And so, yeah, so to be able to perform that role there on stage, it was almost like doing an arena venue. It was vast, but that role for me is a quintessential triple threat. If you are a triple threat performer, now that's one of the roles, and to be able to do it again in that production with that creative team. I mean, Anthony Powell was the costume designer, who is no longer with us, unfortunately. We lost him last year. His stories, I remember being measured from scratch for all my Gene Kelly costumes, my Don Lockwood costumes. And he was there the first time round. He was, he's an multi-Oscar winning costume designer. And he literally would look and change and do things. But as we were having these costume fittings, his stories about Gene, about all these wonderful, Debbie Reynolds, all these people that he's worked with over the years, he'd just tell it firsthand. you know, about these people, and you think, oh my God, that's so and so, that's this famous person, it's that famous person, and that was wonderful. And I felt like Gene Kelly in those costumes, because literally they were like replicas, literally, and it's from someone that was there originally, you know, that was there the first time round. So that was fantastic. And then you put on top of that the choreography, the you know the production of Singing in the Rain. It's the same script, because of the estate and because of the way it is. So it's the same as the movie. So whereas a lot of things on movie they cut at the end of the scenes and then go to another thing, another scene or another musical number, obviously on stage it is literally like a conveyor belt. So if you're playing Don, you don't leave the stage. You literally just keep round, and usually you're changing as you walk on, or you're underdressing clothes that you just take off, and then it happens on stage and off stage. So that was very challenging, very challenging. But again, something I never ever thought I'd ever work in Paris. Never ever thought I'd work at one of the biggest opera houses in the world. And it was an amazing opportunity, and something that I then ended up going back to and playing Billy Lawler in Stephen May's production of 42nd Street out there again, which is absolutely something that was phenomenal and fantastic. It wasn't as demanding. It was demanding physically in the ballets and the technical dance numbers, but it wasn't the size of the part that Don Lockwood was. That literally, that Gene Kelly role leads that entire company. And it also, I never stopped learning, and I learned to be a better leading man. I learned things about leading a company. I learned about my strengths. I learned where I needed to sort of maintain myself. Again, it's funny. I watched today the triathlon, and it was outside the Grand Palais, funnily enough. And I think the Brit won. It was fantastic, and knowing where to pace yourself, he knew exactly within the race where to pace himself to get across that finishing line and win that gold. And that for me, I sort of found a juxtaposition there with doing Don. That it's a marathon, not a sprint, and you really, on those matinee days, you were doing massive physical exertion numbers and singing and triple threat and doing all these kinds of qualities. But again, there's always someone in the audience that has never seen it, probably hasn't seen that production. So you've got to go out as if it's the first night every night. And I really reveled in the challenge, and it was amazing. It was absolutely fantastic. But that's just that. I mean, there's other things. Gypsy will always have a massive part in my heart because of, being nominated for an Olivier. It was insane. Absolutely incredible. Even to this day, as I said, it's incredible. I can't quite believe it. But being able to perform that number was so joyous. And actually, at the time, I was doing Singing in the Rain in Paris, and the way it sort of worked out was we did it in Chichester, Gypsy first, and then Singing in the Rain happened in Paris for a period of time throughout the year. And then the way it sort of worked out was that Gypsy then went to the Savoy Theatre while there was a break, and I happened to be doing Singing in the Rain. And then after Gypsy happened there, it went back to Paris. So I ended up sort of hopping from Singing in the Rain to Gypsy to Singing in the Rain to Gypsy throughout the year, that year. And as it happened with the performances, because I'm quite isolated in what I did, they sort of bunny hopped and skipped over my number in the sort of rehearsals and tech. And because I'd already done it in Chichester, they were happy with that, luckily, thankfully. So I was able to do all the contracts of both shows. And so I remember coming back for my dress rehearsal, and I sort of came back for the production, and the dates sort of aligned quite rightly, but they sort of skipped over them. So as it turned out, I ended up having to come back for the first performance. So I hadn't actually run my number on stage. So I literally finished doing Don and Singing in the Rain, got on the Eurostar, came back, this is the next day, next morning, went straight to the theatre, got my stuff in the dressing room, got myself ready. I think I walked across the stage twice, and then that night we opened, I think it was a matinee for a dress run type thing, and I did it in front of a dressed audience. I remember standing in the wings going, I'm glad I haven't had time to think about anything, and just remembered it. And, obviously I'd gone through it in my head on stage in Paris and things beforehand, but I didn't actually rehearse it with the cast. And so getting to do that was incredible. And then everything that came with it was just phenomenal. And the response it had, it was something that I couldn't imagine in my wildest dreams. But then also you skip forwards and you think of other productions I've been fortunate to be a part of. Mousetrap, it was so phenomenal to be a part of history in that production. Not to mention, White Christmas, all many other different productions. Frankie Valli, getting to stand and perform that, and only a certain amount of people have actually been able to play that role. It's something that I've been very fortunate, and very, very grateful. And I've also been very blessed that I've worked with very, very lovely people, very good people. There will always be tricksy people. I mean, it's the same in any industry. There'll be people that you don't always get along with. There'll be people that always don't get along with you. But essentially, I feel like, I've been very, very fortunate that I've had the pleasure and been able to collaborate with amazing creative teams and work with some amazingly talented people in my career. And, so long it may continue, I hope I get to carry on doing that as projects, reveal themselves moving forwards.
Do you have a dream role, something you always thought you wanted to do?
Dream role. Well, when I was younger, I always wanted to play Tony Manero in Saturday Night Fever, you know, the John Travolta part.
Yes.
I always wanted to do that when I was a lot younger. That was sort of, oh, I'd really like to do that at some point. And that was when that sort of came out, and that was at the height, you know, of when that show became Saturday Night Fever, sort of hit the scene in the West End. But as I got older, I don't know, I've always wanted to do a Shakespeare. And last year I got to play Oberon in A Midsummer Night's Dream, and that was a gift as well, to be able to deal with that. It's like putting a different hat on. You're sort of, you know, you're going out and delivering Shakespearean text. And I loved that. I felt very, very grateful and very, very sort of glad I got cast in that, because I had a thoroughly amazing director, Sean Turner, who's wonderful. And ironically, I didn't know this at the time, but he, in Pajama Game, when we rehearsed it in the West End, he was learning to be a director under Sir Richard Eyre. And so he was in the corner of the room, like learning his craft while we were in rehearsals. And I didn't really know him, didn't really speak to him. And it just shows you never ever know where people are going to be in the future. Fast forward, you know, over a decade later, and I'm walking into an audition for a Shakespeare play for a lead, and he's the director sat behind the desk, and he goes, "You might not remember me, but I was learning to be a director under Richard Eyre." And my mind was blown. I was like, "Oh my goodness!" And I just think, you know, it's funny. I always say to students whenever I've taught them, you know, you never ever know. You know, that adage of always be nice to people on the way up, because you never ever know. You know, when you're on the way down, for example, it's, you know, you never ever know who you're going to meet or where they're going to be in the future. And that was amazing. And then I ended up having a really amazing time working on that production last year, which was brilliant.
I was recently told by someone I interviewed that doing Shakespeare is a bit like doing musical work because of the rhythms in the talking and
Yeah.
verses.
Yeah, exactly. The rhyming pentameter. It's almost it's hard because it's almost like singing. You know, it's there's such a pattern within it, but you can't sing, if that makes sense. You can't, you know, it shouldn't become monotonous. You shouldn't be you've got to keep it within its context. And that again was another challenge of something that I hadn't done since I trained. Like I haven't done any Shakespeare since last year. So you know, over 20 years ago was the last time I sort of looked at, you know, Romeo and Juliet or any other Shakespearean text. And so to be able to sort of dust off those skills and perform that was absolutely rewarding within itself. But yeah, it is very much like that. Again, it's like having a Mary Poppins bag and pulling out your skill set for different things and applying them to what you need at the time. Again, something I feel very fortunate I got the opportunities to do.
What else thing have you ever thought about doing something like Me and My Girl or something?
Oh yeah, I mean, that is a wonderful production. I remember watching Danny Crosley in happened to be in Stephen Mears' production at Chichester Festival Theatre many years ago. And I mean, in my opinion, Danny Crosley is, I've always looked up to Danny Crosley. I don't know if you know him as a performer, but he is a quintessential triple threat. He can do it all. He's absolutely fantastic. Can do straight Shakespeare, but also can play Cosmo in Singing in the Rain. And I was very fortunate in Paris that he was my Cosmo. And so, you know, they say never meet your idols, but I got to work and become best friends with one of the, in my opinion, one of the greatest triple threats that we've had. And so, yeah, I mean, him playing the lead in that role for me, I was like, wow, this is what you want to be a part of. This is the level of sort of expertise you want to sort of try and get to be like. And so, yeah, and so Me and My Girl is just a wonderful production. It's a beautiful, beautiful production, and no doubt it'll come back because it's one of those that stands the test of time. And then different creative teams will put different spins on it, which is also very, very exciting to see.
I think it was updated so well by Stephen Fry in I think the 80s somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was very, very, very different, wasn't it? That production, very different.
Yes. I didn't see, but I remember hearing about it and seeing bits on the internet years later. So,
Yeah,
yes,
really, really great, wasn't it?
absolutely. But the songs as well, they're so lovely and warm.
Yeah, really, really nice. Again, stand the test of time. It's, you know, it's a testament to the writing of the music, isn't it? And the book of the script. You know, it's great. Really, really, really wonderful.
Is there anything you want to add to the interview? Something you wish to talk about that people need to know, in your opinion?
Oh, I just think, if anything, just support theatre, whether it's local, whether it's West End, whether it's touring, whether it's, I think after the pandemic, I feel like, you know, theatre got hit really badly. And I feel like, although people may think it's like, oh, theatre's back and we're all, you know, live and kicking, I feel like it's a lot slower than other avenues. And I feel, in my personal opinion, is that I feel like everyone should just support as much as they can, as I say, whether it's their local theatre or whether it's West End shows. And I know that isn't always easy as ticket prices rise, but if there's a way of going to support the theatre in that sense, we have to pay it forward for the next generation, you know, of youngsters training, want to be a part of the industry, and also for entertainment. You know, it's escapism at its best. Sitting in a theatre, blocking out whatever's going on in your world or your life, you can escape and just be a part of that a couple of hours. It's one of the best things, the best tonics of life, in my opinion. And whatever's going on, good, bad, or indifferent, I feel like that is something that we should really, really address. Whatever political views you have, whatever parties you support, I really feel like we have to support the arts, because if we don't, then no one else will. So that's what I think about that.
It's true. It's around the world that the arts are the last thing that's supported. Well, it's needed for so many aspects of life, but arts in the schools for development, and even when you're older, training in the arts could help you overcome shyness or other issues. Just
absolutely,
yes.
have confidence. You know, even public speaking, things like that. I mean, I personally, I hate speaking in public. Anyone that's been on stage with me. And the company managers said to you, Dan, can you do a speech at the end of the show? It doesn't matter if I've got 10 million songs to do in the show or anything. All I'll be thinking about from that curtain up at the top of that performance is the 4 lines or 5 lines I've got to say, even if it's off a piece of paper, at the end of the show to an audience as Dan, rather than the part that I play. You know, it's a real skill, and it's something that I've learned as I sort of got older. But at the same time, it's not something that comes easily. And I think a lot of people can sort of find a bit of comfort in that. But yeah, I mean, it's so important. The arts is so important for many different things, whether it's confidence, whether it's, you know, even career. To have it as seriously as a career, there's still a lot of people within the world that don't consider what we do for a living as a serious job. It's sort of you know, a means to an end, or when are you going to get a proper job type attitude. And I feel like, you know, there are many people out there, myself included, that have made a career out of this, that it isn't just something that you flipped or, you know, you do willingly, you know, not willingly. It's something that you need to have longevity at, and if you're serious about it, it should be valued as that. I mean, I've been fortunate. I've been in the industry for 20 years since graduating, and, you know, I just feel like, you know, it comes a time when you think, you know, I've kind of, you know, gone through many different productions and got a very long CV, and that's all very well and good, but, you know, it's even things like recently applying for a passport for my daughter, because obviously she's newly born, and even doing that to try and get your passport verified. There's never an actor on the list to sort of say, you know, to verify it. That's not deemed a sort of, you know, secure, trustworthy job, I guess. I don't know. So it's, you know, it's quite interesting in that retrospect. But yeah, it's support the arts. That's what I would say.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this lovely interview.
Oh, well, thank you so much for asking me to be part of your program. Thank you very much.
I love hearing your story. So many shows and so many things you've done, and your enthusiasm is wonderful.
Oh, bless you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I love what I do. It's great. It's part of who I am, but also it's fantastic. Lots of stories. Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Behind the Mirror of Music with Dannii Cohen.